Review, Famicom Miniseries, Volume 21, Super Mario Bros. 2 for Game Boy Advance. This week, Nintendo released the original US version, released the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2 for NES on the Wii Virtual Console. However, this game really isn't the original Super Mario Bros. 2, and this past weekend, I found a copy of Famicom Miniseries Volume 21, Super Mario Bros. 2 for Game Boy Advance at Pink Godzilla Games in Seattle, and I just had to get it. One thing I'll say about this video capture is I recorded on my friend BBQ's DVD-R, and it had issues capturing the sound. So the reason why the sound isn't quite as high on the game is because it sounded really bad digiting. Anyway, when I was digitizing. Anyway, on to the review. Now, the original sequel to Super Mario Bros. Was a new game using the same engine and most of the same graphics as the first game, but with a much more difficult level design, but in a few gameplay changes. It was published on the Famicom Disk System in 1986 in Japan, and technically it could have been brought over to the US on cartridge for the NES. Many other Famicom Disk System games were released in the US as a cartridge, such as Kid Icarus, Metroid, and Legend of Zelda 2, Link's Adventure. However, then Nintendo of America's Howard Lincoln did not like the game because of the increased difficulty, overall similarities to the original Super Mario Bros., or perhaps he just sucked at it. So he ordered Nintendo of America to translate the somewhat vaguely Mario-like game Doki Doki Panic and call it Super Mario Bros. 2 in the US, and they redid the main characters in Doki Doki Panic with Mario and friends. And that's the main reason why US Super Mario Bros. 2 bears so little resemblance to any other Mario game. Nintendo later went on to sell the Mario version of Doki Doki Panic in Japan along with the original on cartridge, but called it Super Mario USA. Now, the original Super Mario Bros. 2 was included in the 16-bit remake in Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo, but it was referred to as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Now, this version not only included the 16-bit remade graphics, but it was made considerably easier by adding extra power-ups and one-ups all over the place. It was also included on the Game Boy Color game Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, but had the difficulty cranked down like the Super Nintendo version. Fast forward a few years when Nintendo was releasing many of the original Famicom hits for the Game Boy Advance in their Famicom Mini Collection. Some of them came out in the US as the NES Classic series. The original Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in the third wave of Famicom Mini games. This version is based on the Famicom Disk System game, and it even has a mascot, Disc-kun, or Mr. Disc, on his yellow cartridge and retro-stylized box. I mean, normally, I don't pay much of attention to the boxes of the game, but the Famicom Mini Collection boxes are just plain cool. Pink Godzilla was selling it for $60, and it was cheaper than me having to get a working Famicom Disk System and the disc version of the game. It is also nice and portable. It looks good on my Nintendo DS. And I've seen it sold online on a couple places as low as $30 and as high as $80 at this one place. So, at first glance, you pick it up and you assume that you're just going to dominate this game since it looks like Super Mario Bros. And you've been dominating that game since the mid-'80s. Well, you're in for a shock. This game is hard, and the levels are peppered with next to impossible jumps, lots of jumping turtles, and even the Goombas can kill you easier. They have like a smaller place that you need to hit them. Even the normally underwater squids appear and fly through the air after Mario as you're trying to jump from platform to platform. The power-ups are scarce and hard to find, and generally, there's overall a lot of falling to your death. I mean, it's fun because it's still Mario, but only a super hardcore, I hate children game, otaku-only version of Mario. I mean, for years, I was a little miffed at Nintendo of America for keeping this game from me, but now that I've got a chance to play it, I can sort of see where they're coming from. In this game, you can either play through the game as Mario or Luigi. Luigi can jump higher, but has less foot traction and ends up falling to his death just as much as Mario, but he can jump a little higher. I was actually very tempted to quote the angry video game nerd in this review, but I'll leave it up to you and imagine what he had to say about this game. I don't know what would be better, or what we still think about Mario games if we were frustrated by this game back as kids in the 80s. Would we be bitter and hold it against Mario, falling 1,000 times to our deaths, or would this make her tougher gamers? I mean, the Japanese gamers tend to hold Mario with a great reverence, and the Super Mario All-Stars version of this game was cleaned up and watered down, while the Famicom Mini version is just as hardcore as the original Famicom Disk System version of the game. The graphics are a little bit stretched to fit the Game Boy Advance screen, but it still looks fine. If you're a hardcore Nintendo freak, then you probably owe it to yourself to get the one Super Mario Bros. Game that Nintendo thought you were not hardcore enough to handle, so they kept it from you for many years. The disc package had a tag that read for super players, and that's really who this game is for. Are you a super player? Do you think you can handle the Super Mario Bros. Game that Nintendo of America thought you couldn't handle as a kid? Well, do ya? Then you should track down a copy of Famicom Miniseries Volume 21 Super Mario Bros. 2 for Japanese Game Boy Advance and find out, because it is tough. And yes, there was a little bit of a lag. There was a definite lag in recording this video, and so that's why we screwed up as many times as we did while recording this video. Peace.